They sent a crew to demolish my lake cabin for not paying HOA fees. The only problem? I'm not even in the HOA. They rolled up with a backhoe and tore apart the home I built with my late wife, all while the HOA president watched with a smile. She thought she was running over some poor old man to steal his lakefront property. What she didn't know was that while her crew was tearing down my walls, my kids were already on their way, and my whole family are federal agents. What happens when a power-tripping HOA that loves to break the law accidentally targets the one family that enforces it for a living? Drop a comment below with where you're watching from, because this story of revenge is one for the books. The mist over the lake that morning was just how I liked it, cool and quiet, hanging low over the water like a soft gray blanket. I took my first sip of coffee, the good stuff I grind myself, and felt the warmth spread through my hands. At 68, these little routines are what keep the world turning straight. Out on the dock, the old wood was damp under my slippers, and the only sound was the gentle lapping of water against the pilings. This was my peace. My wife Sarah and I built the cabin behind me with our own two hands, right down to the little boathouse at the end of this dock. It wasn't just wood and nails, it was 30 years of memories soaked into the grain. I was halfway through my coffee when I saw it. There was something bright orange tacked to the boathouse door. It looked angry against the calm gray morning. I walked closer, my stomach tightening just a little. It wasn't taped, it was nailed. A single thick-headed nail driven right into the wood Sarah and I had painted together a decade ago. That felt wrong. It was a violation before I even knew what it was. I pulled the nail out with my fingers, leaving a small, ugly hole. The paper was some kind of official notice. The header read, Lakeside Pines Homeowners Association. That was the first alarm bell. I wasn't a member of any Lakeside Pines HOA. My property line stops a full half-mile from their manicured little kingdom. My grandfather bought this land clear and free, and the deed I had locked in my file cabinet confirmed it. Below the heading, in big, bold letters, it said, Final note, but they did the opposite. Something about the way she said, community vote, and annexed, felt rehearsed and slippery. Still, she'd said she would fix it. I had to take her at her word. For now, I thanked her and hung up, feeling uneasy, but telling myself the system would work. A mistake was made. A mistake would be corrected. The next morning, the mist was gone, replaced by a hard, bright sun. I was making my coffee when I heard it, the low rumble of a heavy engine and the crunch of tires on my gravel driveway. It wasn't the sound of a neighbor's pickup truck. This was different. I walked to the front window and my heart sank. Parked right where my driveway meets the little access road was a big, dual-axle flatbed truck. On it sat a yellow backhoe, its hydraulic arm folded up like a sleeping insect. A man in a reflective vest and a hard hat hopped out of the truck's cab. He was big, burly, with a face that looked like he rarely smiled. He walked toward my front door, holding a clipboard. I met him on the porch. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He grunted, not looking me in the eye. He just pointed a thick finger at my cabin. "Tom Weller?" "I am," I said. He nodded slowly. "I'm Ted, the foreman with Kruger Demolition. We've got a work order here to take down that boathouse." He tapped his clipboard. "And if the site isn't cleared, we start on the main cabin." I stood there, stunned. "There's a mistake. I called yesterday. The HOA secretary said she was handling it." Ted the foreman finally looked at me, his eyes tired. "Mister, I don't know anything about that. All I know is, we've got orders. She told us to be here at sunup. The order says we either get a certified check for 12 grand or we take it down." He jerked his thumb back toward the backhoe. "And that thing starts easy." The foreman's words hung in the air, heavier than the diesel fumes from his truck. This was real. The sugary voice on the phone was a lie, and the proof was a 10-ton piece of machinery sitting in my driveway, ready to turn my life into splinters. For a moment, I just stared at him, my mind racing. Arguing with this man was pointless. He was just a tool, like the backhoe he brought with him. He was following orders. I gave a slow nod, trying to look calmer than I felt. "All right," I said, my voice raspy. "Let me make a phone call." I turned, without waiting for a reply, walked back inside, and locked the deadbolt. The click of the lock sounded loud in the quiet house. My hands were trembling slightly. I needed to call someone who wouldn't just tell me it was a clerical error. I needed someone who knew how to deal with bullies, who hid behind rules they wrote themselves. I dialed my oldest, Dana. She picked up on the first ring, her voice crisp and clear. "Dad, you okay?" I explained everything, the orange notice, the phone call with the woman named Marla, and now the backhoe parked 20 feet from my porch. I tried to keep my voice even, but she could hear the strain. She didn't interrupt. When I was done, there was a short, sharp silence on her end. When she spoke again, her tone had changed. It was the voice she used when she wasn't just my daughter anymore. It was the voice of Special Agent Weller. "Dad, listen to me carefully," she said, her words precise and deliberate. "Do not go back outside. Do not talk to the foreman. Don't say another word to them. Go to every window and take a picture with your phone. Get the truck, get the backhoe, get the license plate on both. If you can get a clear shot of the man, do it. Then go to your file cabinet. Find the deed to the property and the last property tax bill you paid. Find the survey you had done when you built the boathouse. I want you to take a clear picture of every single page. Every one. Do you understand?" I did. This was a script, a procedure. I was a retired electrician. I understood, following a checklist. "Yes," I said. "Good," she replied. "Email them to me right now. Then I want you to get in your car and drive to the county clerk's office. Be polite, be calm. Ask for a certified copy of the current official plat map for your parcel. Don't just look at it. Get the certified copy. It'll cost a few dollars. Pay it. That piece of paper is your shield. I have to go, but I'll call you back as soon as I have something. I love you, Dad. Now do it." The line went dead. The call couldn't have lasted more than 3 minutes, but it had changed everything. Fear was being replaced by focus. I had a mission. I spent the next hour following her instructions to the letter. I was methodical. I photographed the demolition truck from the kitchen window, the living room window, and the upstairs bedroom, zooming in on the license plate until the numbers were perfectly clear. I photographed the foreman, who was now leaning against his truck, smoking a cigarette, and looking bored. Then I went to the old metal file cabinet in my office. Inside, tucked in a folder labeled House, was every piece of paper that proved this land was mine. The original deed from my grandfather, signed in 1962. My deed, signed when I inherited it. The blueprints for the cabin. And the official county survey from 30 years ago, its lines clear and undeniable, showing my property ending hundreds of yards from where the Lakeside Pines HOA even began. I laid each one out on the kitchen table and took pictures, just as she'd said. I made sure my phone's setting to display the date and time on each photo was turned on. Document everything. That was the rule. It felt good to be doing something, to be building a case instead of just waiting for an attack. When I was done, I drove to the county building downtown. It was one of those old brick buildings that smelled of dusty paper and floor wax. At the records counter, a young woman with tired eyes listened patiently. "I need a certified copy of the plat map for parcel number 75B1, I said, giving her the number from my tax bill. She typed it into her computer, clicked a few times, and then swiveled the monitor toward me. "This one right here?" she asked. On the screen was a map. I saw the outline of the lake, and I saw my little square of land right beside it. I saw the heavy black line that marked the boundary of the Lakeside Pines HOA. and I saw that my property was completely, indisputably outside of it. A wave of relief washed over me. It was a small win, but it felt huge. It was the truth, right there in black and white on a government computer. "That's it," I said. "I need a certified copy." She nodded, printed the map, and then stamped it with a heavy, satisfying clunk. She signed it, and the seal she pressed into the corner made it official. This wasn't just a piece of paper anymore. It was evidence. I was driving back home, the certified map on the passenger seat like a trophy, when my phone rang. It was Dana. "Okay, I've got something," she said, and her voice was grim. "Dad, this isn't a mistake. It's a target." "What do you mean?" I asked, turning onto the road leading back to my cabin. "I did a quick background check on your HOA president, Marla Jansen," Dana explained. "This isn't her first time at the rodeo. Over the last 5 years, she has filed altered property maps in 2 other counties. She finds a property she wants, usually one with water access that's adjacent to an HOA she controls. Then a new, slightly different map gets filed with the county, one where the boundary line has mysteriously moved. 6 weeks ago, she filed an altered map for your area. That's the community vote she was talking about. She forged it." My hands gripped the steering wheel. The sugary voice on the phone now sounded sinister in my memory. The polite-sounding secretary wasn't just mistaken. She was a predator. This entire thing, the notice, the fees, the threat of demolition, it was all a calculated attack, designed to make me panic and either pay or sell. As I pulled into my driveway, the demolition truck was gone. The foreman and his backhoe had vanished. For a second, I felt a flash of hope, thinking my trip to the clerk's office had scared them off. But then I looked at my house, and I saw him. A man in a collared shirt with the Lakeside Pines logo was standing on the road, partially hidden by a tree. He was holding a camera with a long telephoto lens, and it was pointed directly at my living room window. He was taking pictures, documenting my violations from a distance. The realization settled in my gut like a block of ice. They weren't gone. They were just getting started. Dana was right. This wasn't a clerical error. This was targeted harassment. And I was the target. The man with the camera was gone by the time the first black sedan pulled into my driveway. I knew it was Dana before she even stepped out. She moved with a purpose that you don't forget. She wasn't my little girl coming for a weekend visit. This was a federal agent arriving at a scene. She gave me a firm hug on the porch, her eyes scanning the property over my shoulder, taking in the house, the lake, the woods. "You did good, Dad," she said quietly. "The photos are perfect." A few minutes later, 2 more cars arrived, both dark, clean, and official looking. My boys. Ray got out of the first one. At 38, my middle son carried himself with a quiet intensity he'd picked up in Homeland Security. He's a big man, but he moves silently. He just gave me a solid nod, his gaze already sweeping the area, checking the road, the tree line, a silent perimeter check that was second nature to him. The second car held Mark, my youngest. He bounced out with a different kind of energy, a postal inspector's restless curiosity. He gave my shoulder a squeeze. "Don't worry, Dad," he said with a small, confident grin. "Mail fraud, wire fraud. This Marla lady is stepping in it. Big time." They brought in briefcases and laptops. My old oak kitchen table, the one where they'd done their homework as kids, was suddenly a command center, the heart of our counteroffensive. It was time to go to war. Dana laid it all out like she was briefing a case. She took my certified plat map, the one from the county clerk, and placed it in the center of the table. "This is our foundation," she said. "The ground truth." Then, she placed another map beside it, one she had printed from the digital files the county had on record from a filing made 6 weeks ago. At first glance, they looked identical. But then Mark took a ruler and laid it across the 2 maps. The line, was subtle. On Marla Jansen's map, the boundary of the Lakeside Pines HOA had been nudged about 200 feet to the north, a neat little curve that just happened to swallow up my entire property, including my dock and boathouse. She didn't just move a line, Ray said, his voice a low rumble. She stole your land on paper. Next, Mark pulled out a document. And this, he said, is how she made it legal. It was the community vote Marla had mentioned on the phone. A single page, claiming the homeowners had voted to annex my land. Below was a list of signatures. Mark had already highlighted 3 of them. Frank Miller. He read, tapping the first name. He died in 2018. I checked the public records. Joan Peterson. Stroke, 2020. Carl Beasley. He moved to Florida 10 years ago. My jaw tightened. These weren't just names. They were my neighbors. Frank had helped me put the roof on the cabin. Joan used to bring Sarah flowers from her garden. Marla hadn't just forged documents. She'd used the memory of my friends to do it. It was a special kind of evil. We sat there for a moment in silence. The 3 pieces of paper on the table telling a story of calculated criminal greed. My original deed, clear and simple. The forged map, the fraudulent vote. It was a paper trail of a crime in progress. Just as I was processing the sheer audacity of it, I heard the telltale rattle of the mail slot in my front door. I went to check it. On the floor was a crisp white envelope with the Lakeside Pines HOA logo on it. No stamp. It had been delivered by hand. My hands were steady now as I opened it. Inside was a new bill. Second notice. Fines doubled. It read. The original amount of nearly $12,000 was now crossed out. The new total was $23,480.52. They had added a new fine for non-compliance with exterior paint code. The color of my cabin, the same soft brown it had been for 30 years, was now apparently a $10,000 violation. It was so absurd, so brazen, that I almost had to laugh. They were just making it up as they went along, trying to bury me in fake debt, to create so much pressure that I would break. I brought the letter back to the kitchen table and laid it next to the other evidence. My kids looked at it, and a cold anger settled over the room. This wasn't about a boathouse or paint colors anymore. This was about whether a person's life, their home, can be taken away with nothing more than a few lies printed on paper. I looked from the fake bill to the solid truth of my grandfather's deed. I thought about what it means to own something, to have a place in the world that is yours. They think a line on a map is just something you can move, but it's not. It's tied to the ground it represents. You can't vote against gravity, and you can't just move a boundary line because you want a prettier dock. The next morning, the fight came to my front door again, but this time it wasn't quiet. It was 5:30 a.m. Still dark out, when a tremendous bang and the screech of tortured metal jolted me out of bed. It sounded like a car crash in my driveway. I rushed to the window and saw the taillights of a massive truck pulling away. It had left something behind. A 30-yard dumpster, the kind you see at major construction sites, was dropped squarely at the end of my driveway, completely blocking it. It wasn't just blocking my car. It was positioned so that no vehicle, not an ambulance or a fire truck, could get in or out. This was a cage. I could see a sign spray-painted on its rusty red side. Property of Lakeside Pines HOA. Debris removal. They were calling my life debris. I didn't panic. The initial shock quickly hardened into a cold, methodical anger. My kids were already up, drawn by the noise. Ray stood at the window, his arms crossed, his face a stony mask. He saw it not as an inconvenience, but as a tactic, a barrier, a threat. They're trying to box you in, Dad, he said, his voice flat. Make you feel helpless. But I wasn't helpless. I was documenting. I picked up my phone, but before I did anything else, I showed Mark my system. It was simple, the way an old electrician likes things. See? I said, holding up my phone. I don't use any fancy apps. I just open the Notes app on my phone. I write down the date, the time, and what happened. 5:32 a.m. Large dumpster dropped, blocking driveway. Then, I take my photos. The dumpster, the license plate of the truck, if I can get it, its position. I make sure the timestamp is on in the camera's settings. It's proof. It was my how-to guide for fighting back. No jargon, just facts. Mark nodded, a flicker of appreciation in his eyes. Then he looked at the hand-delivered notice from the day before. He tapped the name at the bottom. Greg Purcell, HOA Treasurer. All right, Mark said, a sly grin spreading across his face. Let's see if Mr. Purcell wants to talk about his debris. He found the HOA's number and dialed, putting the call on speaker for us all to hear. He wasn't Mark Weller, U.S. Postal Inspector. He was just a concerned son. The phone was answered by a gruff, sleepy voice. Yeah? Hello, Mark said, his voice friendly and polite. I'm calling on behalf of my father, Tom Weller. We're just a little confused about this large dumpster that appeared in his driveway this morning, and we'd like to get it sorted out. There was a chuckle on the other end. Sorted out? You pay the fine, it gets sorted out. Simple. It was Greg Purcell. He sounded exactly like a man who enjoyed his petty power. I understand, Mark said, his tone still perfectly reasonable. But we're trying to figure out what the fines are even for. This property isn't in your HOA. Greg laughed again, a wheezing, unpleasant sound. Says you. Says our paperwork. You are. And until you pay up, things are just gonna get more inconvenient. A lot more. And then, Mark laid the trap. We just want this to stop, he said, putting a little desperation in his voice. My dad's an old man. We don't want any trouble. We're thinking he should just sell the place and move. The line went quiet for a beat. We all held our breath. When Greg spoke again, his voice was dripping with smug satisfaction. He thought he was winning. Well now, he said slowly, savoring the moment. That's the smartest thing I've heard all day. To be honest with you, kid, we'll make it so he wants to sell. It'll be a lot cheaper for him in the long run. Mark's eyes met mine across the kitchen table. He had him. A direct admission of their strategy. Harassment with the goal of forcing a sale. Mark ended the call politely, but the air in the room had changed. We now had a voice to go with the paper trail. Dana had been typing silently on her laptop the entire time. Without looking up, she said, "That's extortion. Combined with the mail and wire fraud from the forged documents, that's a federal case." But she wasn't ready to play that card. Not yet. We had to follow the proper local channels first. We would beat them using their own rulebook, but legally this time. Dana drafted a formal cease and desist letter. It was a thing of beauty, clear, direct, and ironclad. It listed the illegal blockade of my driveway, the fraudulent documents, the fines levied without jurisdiction, and cited the recorded conversation with Greg Purcell as evidence of a coordinated harassment campaign. We weren't asking, we were demanding. An hour later, the county sheriff himself, a man I'd known for 20 years, pulled up on the main road. He couldn't get down my driveway, of course. He got out of his car, looked at the dumpster, and shook his head. He walked over and I met him by the road. I handed him the letter. He read it, his expression growing grimmer with each line. He walked over to the Lakeside Pines entrance, and a few minutes later, Marla Jansen emerged from her perfect-looking house, her face a mask of polite concern. The sheriff didn't raise his voice. He just handed her the letter. The look on her face as she read it was worth more than the $23,000 they claimed I owed. The sugary charm vanished, replaced by a flash of pure, unadulterated fury. 20 minutes later, the same truck that had dropped the dumpster returned, and with another series of groans and screeches, hauled it away. The driveway was clear,